Does it look like everybody's? No. Yeah, we have some people that I don't know who's on here, and so I'm going to put them on mute. And then if you're by phone, you would have to do, I think, *6 to come off. And then here comes Leanne. And board members, you would have to unmute yourself when you're ready to speak, just to make sure we don't get any background noise. They're still flying in.
Kim?
Yes.
Kim? Sorry
Yes.
to bother you. So, am I the last MARB member that you need for a vote? If so, I have to probably get off around 11:15 because my daughter is getting married on Saturday. So I have a few things going on, but I didn't want to miss the meeting.
No, we have a full quorum. I actually have a couple extra, so if you have to roll off, we will be fine. We will still have a quorum. Thank you. Let's get started because we are recording already. I'm going to mute everybody, and you can take yourself back off mute. All right, I would like to call to order and have opening remarks on the Municipal Accountability Review Board. It is a regular meeting today. Today is December 18th, and the time is 10:03. We do have a quorum, and we are recording. For everybody's sake, CTN has joined us today. I do have some opening remarks as some administrative changes have occurred since we last met. I hope everybody would join me in a farewell to Secretary Jeff Beckham, and who stepped down from his position about 2 weeks ago, as the governor will be nominating him to become a Superior Court judge. And so we would like to wish him well and congratulate Jeff on his nomination. The governor has nominated Joshua Wojcik to serve as the next OPM secretary and will formally submit his nomination to the General Assembly for consideration at the start of the 2026 regular session in February. In the meantime, Mr. Wojcik will be serving as the acting secretary to OPM. Some of you may be aware Mr. Wojcik comes to OPM from the Comptroller's Office, where he recently held the Director of Health and Policy and Benefit position. He's not able to be present today as there are conflicting meetings, and he will be at the State Bond Commission today. So please join me in welcoming Joshua to the MARB and to OPM. Today is a Teams meeting, so MARB members, please speak out clearly so that we can make sure that the recording includes your comments. And that is, I am Kimberly Kennison, and I am chairing this meeting on behalf of the Secretary as his designee. And that's it I have for opening remarks. Over to Mr. Alvarez if he has any opening remarks as well.
Thank you, Kim, and nothing extensive, just really congratulations to former Secretary Beckham on his nomination to the court. Congratulations to Secretary-designee Wojcik, and I'm looking forward to working with him and with you, Kim, continuing to work with you, Kim. And then biggest congratulations to Steve and to his daughter on her marriage. And so that's all I have from me.
Yes, congratulations, Steve, too. All right. Second item on the agenda is the public comment, and the public comment portion of this agenda, members of the public will be provided an opportunity to speak. Before making their comments, the members that wish to speak must be recognized by the chair, and speakers shall limit their comments to 3 minutes. And due to our time constraints and a full agenda today, speakers who are on the phone would have to press *6 to unmute themselves. Is there anyone interested in commenting during this public comment session? Remember *6 if you are on the phone. All right, I don't hear anyone, so we will close the public comment period and move on to the next agenda item, which is approval of the minutes from May 15th, special meeting. A copy of the minutes were in your packet for the MARB members to review. And if you have any questions, let's discuss them now. If not, I would look for a motion for approval. Thank you, Susan.
Second.
Thank you, Sal. Any discussion? Last chance. All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody wish to abstain? All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Agenda item number 4, Hartford Subcommittee meeting, and an update on that. Included in your packet was the actual write-up on that meeting, and that's a summary of what took place during that meeting. Pretty much a few of those items that are included there are going to be discussion items today. So I'm not sure that we would need to go through it. So what I would like to do is ask when the mayor and the superintendent actually comment. It's going to be a continuation, I would say, from what occurred at the Hartford Subcommittee for us to comment on in today's meeting. So let's move to agenda item number 5, which is the City of Hartford. And we have we'd like the mayor to provide us with an executive summary. So Mayor, will you please provide the MARB members with an update on any changes or improvements made to the operation of the city? And then the mayor, you can also include any updates that may have changed since the Hartford Subcommittee on September 17th. Over to you, Mayor.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'll start with my own congratulations, both to Steve and on your daughter's wedding, but also to Secretary Beckham, who we've appreciated the chance to work with in that role, and soon to be Judge Beckham, and congratulations in his new role. And Acting Secretary Wojcik, who I've known since we were both in our early 20s, and I've always known to be a really thoughtful and intelligent individual. So we look forward to working with him in the coming years. I will have to hop off after this because I know he's going to be at his first bond commission meeting. We've got something on the bond agenda as well. So I'll be going to the Capitol soon, but wanted to give you a few updates since the last meeting. Probably the biggest one for purposes of the MARB is that we just announced in this past week that Standard & Poor's has upgraded the city from BBB to A- rating. It's the first time we've been in A territory with a rating agency in over a decade, and they pointed to stable outlook. They specifically attributed to sustained improvement in our financial position, higher reserve. We are in fiscal year 25. I think we mentioned this in our September meeting, but we will show the city reaching its unassigned fund balance policy of 7.5% of expenditures for the first time in well over a decade. And as you remember, in 2018, when we were first under MARB oversight, we were less than 1% of our fund balance. That is a remarkable, I think, improvement in our reserves. They pointed to consistently positive operating results in the years since 2018, and also, for purposes of this meeting, I should say, pointed to the city's relationship with the MARB and contract assistance as part of what they saw as a stronger sort of fiscal governance within City Hall. So the work of the MARB was directly called out in that report, and in a positive way. And so we continue to appreciate this relationship with the MARB. Along that note, we mentioned in our Hartford Subcommittee meeting that the city is looking to enter the bond market again. We've been meeting with bond advisors and the city treasurer and drafted a timeline for what that might look like. And as you all know, the contract for financial assistance requires that we receive the approval of both the state treasurer and secretary of OPM. And so we will look forward to having those conversations as well, and discussing more in depth sort of our financial position and why we think it is time for a very modest, reasonable bond offering. But we've got some really significant deferred maintenance that I think has been showing in the city, both on our roads and sidewalks, in our fleet at the city, and so we are looking to re-enter the bond market to try to address some of that, some of the issues that have occurred as a result of ongoing deferred maintenance at the city. And I know that there will be a conversation later on about labor negotiations. I figured I'd address it at a high level up front. We this past year have come to agreements with 1716. I know schools have come to agreements with the teachers. We are currently in arbitration with our firefighters union, although we continue to have conversations and hope to resolve that contract outside of arbitration if possible. We're in negotiations with MLA at the city, and then next year we'll see CHPIA and police negotiations beginning the first half of 2026. So, working to address some of the wage issues that have that our employees have faced over the last few years, while the city has struggled to get its financial footing again. But want to do that obviously in a way that doesn't put us right back into the same financial position in the future. And so that is at a high level my update, and happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Any questions for the MARB members? First, I want to congratulate you on that bond rating increase. That is exceptional to hear, and great work. And I know it's a lot of hard work of the leadership in Hartford to actually get to this point. So this is fantastic news, especially for the MARB.
We really appreciate that. It's been a team effort, and I want to specifically thank Julian and our budget director, and Leanne Rawls, who's our finance director, but also these regular conversations with the MARB, I think, have helped a lot. And it's been, it was less than 12 months since we received the last upgrade from BBB- to BBB. But this upgrade, we were certainly hoping for an upgrade. We didn't expect them to move us up 2 notches from BBB to an A-. So we're very excited about it.
Fantastic news. I don't see any hands. All right. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
We'll move over to the superintendent and ask that he would provide us with the Hartford Public Schools executive summary, and the MARB members would look for you to provide us with any changes or improvements that have taken place since our last meeting for the operations of the Hartford Public School.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andre Townsell here, Superintendent of Hartford Public Schools. First, I want to say, I started this opportunity on August 4th, 2025. And ever since, ladies and gentlemen, I've hit the ground running. I've been to every last school building multiple times, met with every union, every department multiple times, multiple community forums. And I've been all over the place. As a matter of fact, a little plug for anyone watching live. If you go to our website, we have the superintendent's 100-day report of listening and learning. That information is there. We've shared that all over our community. I want to share, I'm very excited because I appreciate the work that took place prior to my arrival. Specifically, there were many different audits that took place. There was a Blue Ribbon Commission that came with recommendations. There was the Public Works audit that came with some recommendations, a special education audit that came with recommendations with regards to the organization, New Solutions K-12, and very last, there was an audit done on our magnet school our magnet school report. What I really like about that is I had the opportunity to not only look at those reports, but read those recommendations thoroughly. I had a walkthrough with New Solutions K-12 to talk about special education. It's no stranger that there's a concern with regards to special education in the city of Hartford Public Schools. And we're making those adjustments by looking at the recommendations, possibly partnering with the state to support with some solutions. I'm going to tell you why I need to partner. Additionally, looking at the recommendations from the Blue Ribbon Commission, I'm just happy with the work that's being done. We signed a partnership with the Connecticut Literacy Model, Hill Literacy, doing coaching in all of our schools, professional development for teachers to support with our pedagogy and reading and writing. And I'm very excited about it. I've been to almost every last one of the professional developments with my hand on the pulse to see firsthand what's happening. And I am encouraged by what I'm seeing. In fact, we received a report from the Connecticut State Department of Education commending Hartford Public Schools for the progress that's being made. I'd be more than happy to possibly drop that letter in the chat just for members to have in their hand. But we're making a lot of progress across the board. I'm excited about that. The state talks about that. But our biggest challenge, ladies and gentlemen, is our finances. I just want to share my goal as superintendent of Hartford Public Schools is to ensure that we're the best school system we can possibly be. We want to ensure that moving forward, Hartford Public Schools' better days are in front of us. And we do that by making sure that our pedagogy is where it's supposed to be, our climate and culture is where it's supposed to be, and post-secondary opportunities are made available. The great partnership that we have with the Hartford Promise is second to none. It says that if you live in the city of Hartford, go to a Hartford Public School, maintain a 3.0 grade point average and a 93% attendance rate, you are guaranteed up to a $100,000 scholarship. We're really signal boosting that message across the city because sometimes our families do not know. It's like the best kept secret. It's been so many people that I talked to about the Hartford Promise, and they say, wow, I did not know. So we're really trying to spread that far and wide because the reality is we have about 8,000 plus students who live in Hartford Public School area, but choose not to go to a Hartford Public School. And it's for whatever reason. I think over time, trust was lost. The goal is to earn trust back. And I just want to share this very much with you. Financially, you'll hear for later in our financial report that we're probably forecasting a $30 to $35 million budget deficit. But I want you to know that I've had the opportunity to sit down with our Chief Financial Officer, Richard, and scrub through our finances to say, hey, where can we find the savings? What can we do? And I want you to know what's already been done to show you the position that we're in and the support that we need. Since fiscal year 2024, so I'm talking about FY24, FY25, and right now FY26, we have mitigated our budget by $70 million. We've cut $70 million, $19.1 million last year, fiscal year 25, $40 million. Fiscal year 24, we cut $10 million. And also over those last 3 years alone, we've cut 521 staff members. So we've not only cut $72 million cash money, we also lost 500,000 employees to the system. And when we're looking at this upcoming budget, we're still forecasting a $30 million deficit. And I don't want the question to be, well, make cuts. We cut. There's nothing else to cut. I see with my own eyes, people are stretched thin. And if we want Hartford Public School to be the best it possibly can be, my prayer is that we can find other solutions outside of cutting because we were cut, the last 3 years, $70 million. But going back since fiscal year 16, $187 million have been mitigated from our budget. I just want you to know. So we're not splurging over here. We're praying for grants. We're praying for philanthropic support. Literally praying for it because we're bleeding. And I know we talk about, possibly looking at school consolidation and school closure. The reality is we have 39 schools. And if you close one school, you'll be surprised if you earn $1 million. So that's not the strategy, respectfully, because we have a structural deficit. And I think our Chief Financial Officer would be able to share that more in depth. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm still feel super optimistic. I look toward our future with anticipation as opposed to apprehension. But I do believe if we align with the necessary supports, that our next move will be our best move, and Hartford Public Schools Better Days is absolutely in front of us. So I'm going to park my bus on that. Thank you so much, Ms. Kimberly Kennison.
Mhm. Thank you, Mayor.
Superintendent, you call
questions?
me the mayor.
Oh, thanks. How was that? Um, Thank you. Sorry about that. Any questions from the MARB members? All right. Well, thank you very much, and for all of your hard work and we look forward to taking a look at your 100-day report. And we love to hear the excitement and the energy, because that does move mountains. So keep up the good work. Next item on the agenda today is a review and discussion about the monthly financial reports from the city and also the Board of Education. The city and the board have provided us with their October monthlies. They're included in your package, and we would then ask the city to provide us with an update on your October numbers. I'm assuming, Julian, that's going to be you today?
Yes, thank you. And good morning, members of the MARB. The report that you have in your packet this morning is our period 4, which is through the end of October. And you'll see in that report that overall we're projecting a end of year deficit of $3.86 million. This is a little bit less of a deficit than what was projected in the period 3 report. In period 3, we're projecting just a shade over 4 million, and it's come down slightly to about $3.86 million unfavorable by year end. At the current time, we're not projecting any variances in our revenues. So all of the unfavorability that we're projecting is on the expenditure side. As far as revenues go, so far this year, we are at 51% of our total collections versus budget, and that compares to about 50.1% for the same period last year. Our property tax collections overall are at 54.8%. That compares to 52.7% for the same period last year. So our collections in property taxes are as well as or better than prior years for the same period. Licenses and permits are reported slightly ahead of last year's. Some of this is just attributable to timing in the posting of revenues. Our interest income compared to last year is actually down slightly, not surprisingly, given the reductions in interest rates over the last year. But we also did budget a lower amount for interest income, so we still anticipate hitting our budget figure. And on the intergovernmental side, which is the other very large component of our revenues, we're also projecting to come in on budget. They're coming in at the typical pace for intergovernmental, which is primarily state aid to the city. You just recalling our last meeting where we covered the additional revenue from the grants in aid program, where the city is receiving an additional $8 million above and beyond what was budgeted. We're not including that in our projections because those funds are going to be earmarked for capital needs. So those are not reported here. And then our other revenues are more or less on pace to reach budget. So for the time being, revenues look strong, but we're not forecasting any significant variance at this point. On the expenditure side, overall, we're showing 33% of our budget expended for the period. That compares to just about 32% for the same period last year. Our unfavorability of 3.86 million is comprised largely in the payroll area, and you'll recall from prior years that we use a pretty conservative approach in forecasting our payroll. We don't recognize any vacancy savings until we've actually achieved them. So we recognize our vacancy savings month by month. In contrast to that, we forecast our overtime based on what we've seen so far in the year. So as the year progresses and we recognize more vacancy savings, that unfavorability in payroll tends to moderate over the course of the year. And typically by year end, we are showing favorable balance in that part of the budget. The other area where we're forecasting at this point unfavorability is in our benefits section. That's just under 1.5 million unfavorable. And you probably remember from several years of the budget process that is the section where we budget our attrition factor for non-public safety departments. And it's actually a budgeted negative number. And so that number, we need to actually achieve savings in benefits to reach that hurdle and clear it just to break even in benefits. So over the course of the year, as we recognize favorability in other areas of the benefits section, we expect to see that number to moderate over the course of the year too. So, period 4 results more or less on par with prior years. And those are the highlights from our period 4 report.
Thank you, Julian. I think I noticed that your revenue is flatlined, and I understand you want to be conservative, but as we have experienced in the past, when we look at your performance being higher than last year, and especially in the property tax area, I think that we could assume that that revenue line will be increasing, as well as as you mentioned, the payroll side being decreasing from the shortfall and increased revenue was my
I
point.
think that's fair to say. And
Okay.
right. And we build, you'll recall that part of our multi-year planning with the board has been to try to achieve a minimum of $5 million surplus to go towards unassigned fund balance and to address capital needs that have been deferred through our surplus as well. And so we feel it's appropriate to be very conservative in the early stages until we really lock those in and then come up with a plan for the allocation of the surplus.
Very good. Any question from the MARB members? I see none. We have a quiet group today. Is your mics working? All right. Thank you, Julian. Let's move over to, I believe, Caitlin, you're going to walk us through the board's education's financials.
Yes, and we can see if I generate some questions and thoughts throughout all of this. I'm going to start, this will be just the monthly financials. It is a separate report that you received with the details. In the PowerPoint that was sent, it's also the first couple slides in there. So I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint that has the summary. And this PowerPoint, we will also continue throughout this discussion to turn to the FY27 budget planning. So just to orient you. I'm going to share my screen. So I am on slide 3 of the PowerPoint that was shared, which is summarizing the report on our monthly financials. So the overall summary here, one process improvement we've been making is just how we do our projection process. It's something that we've started doing earlier in the year to really understand what the trends are, what we need to be watching for, and if there's any moves that we can make. I shared last time that we were facing about a 15 million or so deficit for the end of this year. It's slightly higher now. I'll talk about why, and I'll just talk about all the components for anyone who wasn't part of that conversation. So overall, about a 17 to 18 million dollar deficit projected. This right now is just based on what we know about revenue and staffing. We are going to have more information in January about other components of our budget, especially tuition payments, which is a huge component. One piece around this is that our enrollment has declined significantly this year. We're about 1,400 students lower than we were last year. When we get into the bigger budget kickoff presentation, we're going to share a lot of data about what's driving that, where did students go, what does that mean? But just the summary overall is that we are significantly lower on enrollment than we were last year, and it's a bigger drop than in previous years. What this impacts for us, one is revenue-wise, the magnet operating grant that's based on the number of suburban students that enroll in Hartford magnet schools, and we are down in that area. It also impacts, and this is a bit more convoluted because it's not necessarily based on this enrollment number, but it is based on declining enrollment over time. The ECS grant was fully funded this year. The anticipated increase we were going to get was actually bigger than what we ended up getting because our enrollment had declined between the years in which that was calculated. So that one's a bit more complicated, but enrollment decline is contributing to the fact that while we got more in ECS this year, it wasn't as much as was initially anticipated. So there's that piece around enrollment and revenue. The biggest piece of this is our staffing rates, and this is actually overall exciting news. So we have a way lower vacancy rate this year compared to last year. So last year, our vacancy rate around this time was around 13% for certified staff. So that's inclusive of teachers, different types of teachers, especially special education teachers. We're down to 3% this year. And so that overall is really exciting. We attribute a lot of that to the new teacher contract that went into effect this year that had significant salary increases for teachers. The budgetary aspect, however, is that we predicted a 6% vacancy rate. So we thought we would go from 13 to 6%, which at the time felt pretty aggressive, but we surpassed that. We're at 3%. And so that is what is generating some of that increased deficit. And so again, excited that we are filling more seats. It's absolutely, for teachers, it's absolutely something we're going to have to take into account in next year's budget now that we know that we are able to achieve that type of vacancy rate. So when I shared the last time, those two things are the same. The new piece is around special education, which we will also talk about a lot today. This is specifically around students within Hartford Public Schools. There are additional students based on their individualized education plans and mandated services in need of paraprofessionals. And so some of those students are newly enrolled in Hartford Public Schools. They come to us with this as part of their IEP already. And so we needed to increase the number of total allocations for adult support paraprofessionals for education by 60. And again, that's to meet those mandated services. The team thoroughly reviewed any efficiencies that could be generated, making sure, all students who are receiving them need them. How can we be creative in staffing? And this was the result of what the additional need was. So that is what is driving this. There's some pieces on revenue. The vacancy rates, as I said, is the biggest part. And then the addition from the last time is around special education paraprofessionals. This is just a visual depiction of the specific areas of our budget compared to last year, where I'll just point out a couple of things. You'll see certified salaries is trending a bit higher than it was last year. That's attributed to higher salaries, especially for teachers, and the decreased vacancy rate. You see a slight increase as well in non-certified, but not as big because teachers is really where we are experiencing that difference. And then really the other pieces of this are largely related to timing at this point in the year. So system-wide purchase services, that really has to do with the timing of transportation and tuition payments. It's not necessarily an indicator of something yet, although we did budget higher for those categories this year, knowing the trends we have seen over time. And the last piece I'll point out, sundry, is our benefits. That is also a timing piece. We are self-insured. There's a lot of work that goes into kind of capturing those payments. We do think it'll be more than last year, again, because of the vacancy rate, the rising cost of healthcare. But that gap right now is not indicative of what the gap will be by year end. That's actually part of the payroll projection we do that I shared related to the vacancy rates, leading to that anticipated deficit. So one more slide, and then I'll be done with FY26. So just next steps, obviously transparency, talking with the city about this. We are trying to be open with what we're experiencing so that we can have conversations about it. We're also now monitoring our non-salary expenses. So what I just shared is just salary. And for those of you that have been following along, Hartford's budget has a lot of non-salary expenses. Tuition is about 30% of our budget at this point, and we don't have a better sense of tuition payments until about January. That's largely related to the special education services that students in choice schools are receiving. It takes the fall to kind of document those, get the requisitions put on, et cetera. So we will have a better sense then of how we're trending with tuition relative to projection. I will say we projected a lot higher from last year, knowing some of the trends that we've seen. And we are also doing a hiring review process. So for any mid-year hires or folks that are leaving mid-year, we're really looking strongly at, is there a need to fill this position because we have filled so many positions already. So there's a more rigorous process on that front for what we can control related to salary. And then finally, this will kind of translate into the conversation part 2 that we will have about FY27. We're using all of this data to inform our assumptions for next year. So when the superintendent mentioned a $30 to $35 million deficit, it's taking into account this data. So we are updating our enrollment, our vacancy assumptions, special education assumptions based on this data, and we will continue to do so as we get more data in January. So we're both using this data to inform this year, but also it's informing that multi-year projection. So I will pause there. That is the piece on the FY26 monthly update.
Thank you. I don't have any immediate questions. Wonder if yep. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. Over to you.
Yeah, I appreciate the candor and the clarity with which you are able to kind of project where you are and why you are where you are. But I do have to say I am concerned that your projected deficit number has grown from the last time we spoke. And now at this point, with an $18 million projected deficit, this is, a pretty substantial shortfall that you're facing in the current year. And so I'm wondering, are there more aggressive steps that you are considering, such as, you talked about a more rigorous review of any vacancies. You could take that a step further and talk about a hiring freeze or, something more definitive. You could look at all of your discretionary accounts and simply freeze those potentially, or put in place a process to ensure that really only the most critical discretionary items are getting purchased. I'm just concerned about the magnitude of the shortfall that you're projecting and the direction that it seems to be going in for this year. And so, I just kind of want to put that on the record that I do have some concerns. I think you're doing a terrific job, and I think you're on top of it. And it's good that you're on top of it, but still, the shortfall itself does definitely concern me. So.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I don't disagree on that front in terms of kind of the concern around it. I will say, just to respond to some of your points, yes, I think on a hiring freeze, to be more targeted in what I'm saying, some of the hiring review process, it's in the context of the school district, it is hard to do a blanket hiring freeze. We absolutely can for things such as central office positions, for certain roles that we know we don't need. The reason we don't do a blanket one is that sometimes there are roles like the adult support special education paraprofessionals or teachers that there is a need to hire based on mandated services. And so we can speak more precisely to that because we are trying to basically cap hiring of roles that we know are not required, but we can't do a blanket because there are certain roles that we do need to fill based on mandated services. But absolutely hear you on that. And on the non-salary expenses, the nuance there is that, yes, freezing the discretionary, especially general fund expenses, there are some grant related expenses that it is in our best interest to continue to make plans for related to that. Of course, after we've done the analysis of how can we use all of our grant funds to support with this, right? But there's certain grant funds, only certain types of things that can be done with it aligned to plans associated with that. So I'll say your point is well taken. I agree. And I think there's just some nuance when we go about it, but that definitely when it comes to some of our general funds and when it comes to roles that we know are not necessary during the year, that we could be a bit more aggressive on that front, and that we do still need to move forward with certain types of roles related to mandated services or grant related purchases.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you both. Before I hop over to number 2, Mike Reese, you have a hand up. He's a member of my team. I want to make sure that we're all set here. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Lisa.
I think Sue.
Oh,
Yeah,
Sue,
go ahead,
I'm
Sue.
sorry. I see the number 1. Forgive me.
It's okay. A couple of questions. With hiring 60 special ed paraprofessionals, is that an increase in the number of special ed students? Is it because you're complying with IEPs in a way that may not have occurred before? Or are you seeing an influx of special ed students beyond what you anticipated?
I'm actually going to have Dr. Hoffman, who's the head of special education, is on the call. So I'll pass that to you to talk about that piece.
Thanks, CFO Richard. I would say it's a combination of all. We saw an increase of students enrolling in Hartford Public Schools between July and, well, to the present. So students that do come in that are enrolled throughout the year, coming in with paraeducator on their IEP, we do have to address immediately. The need is also increasing. And so while we attend PPTs and we notice that there is data to support a paraeducator on the IEP, we have to respond in that manner as well.
Okay, and I have a question for Caitlin again. When you said 30% of your budget is tuition, you have no control over that, correct?
Correct. And that is some of when we get into the rest of the presentation, it really is what are the structural factors? And that is a huge part, especially special education tuition is one of the biggest challenges.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa.
Thank you so much, Kim. Actually, I'm going to remove my hand being raised because Sue just made the point that I wanted to make with regards to the lack of ability to really control a lot of the forces that are impacting your budget, including that tuition number, the fact that we do have a funding formula here in the state of Connecticut that is tied to enrollment. So when you have a reduction in enrollment, you do have a reduction in state support. But just looking forward, and I know that we'll get to this shortly, but the projected deficits moving forward are just very alarming. Hartford Public Schools is educating our most high need population here in the state. And I know that Secretary Beckham, during the last MARB meeting, he kind of made a comment about really trying to understand the structural deficit and to come up with policy solutions to address it. So I'm interested in what work has been done since that time. But thank you, Sue, for asking the question with regards to tuition.
Over to you, Sal.
Budget is essentially a work of fiction. It's what you hope is going to happen. And, while I share Mr. Hamilton's concern, Hartford's problem is a lot different than somebody like West Haven that has lots of resources and they just don't know how to use them. I think the last I heard, the median income, and this was maybe 6 years ago, the median income of somebody who lives in Hartford was under $20,000 a year. So between that and the inability to control which children are special needs, it really makes this a very difficult situation for Hartford, and I appreciate that. And that's why, while I share Mr. Hamilton's concern, I just don't know how much more you can cut without it really impacting the ability to educate the children in Hartford.
Thank you, Sal. Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, I just had a follow-up question on the special ed tuition, because I thought I heard you say, Caitlin, that your projections right now are really based on looking at your wage accounts and not, a deep dive on your non-wage accounts. And so now that concerns me, is the potential deficit even bigger? Basically, the question is, do your deficit projections include updated projections on out-of-district tuition, special ed tuition, or is that not factored in yet? And is that another potential area where it could cause the projected deficit to grow even larger?
Yes, so on tuition, so I think the one point around that is just because it's a fixed expense, we don't have a lot of control. In terms of timing, that is in January, we will have a better sense around tuition, especially around special education. And so, yes, it is possible that would increase the deficit. I will say that on the tuition front, we did look at historical data for this budget and had an 8% increase in our tuition category budgeted over last year. And so we are hoping that will account for what we have typically seen in terms of the tuition increases, which have been growing over time. But yes, at this time, we won't know until January to have a more firm projection on that piece. So it could change the deficit outlook either way at that point.
Okay. Tom again, or okay. You're all set. Any other questions? All righty, I don't see any. The next item on the agenda is for us to have the city and the Board of Education review their 5-year plan and the mitigation plan. The city is to address any changes that have taken place in the 5-year plan and the mitigation plan. And Julian, can you provide us with any update in that area? And then followed by Caitlin to do the same.
Yes, I think that we haven't made any significant changes to our 5-year plan per se. I think in terms of the mitigation measures, the biggest movement has been in the area where we do overlap with the Board of Ed. So I won't steal too much of the Board of Ed's thunder on this, but I think that the big movement since our last meeting has been in the area of working with the consultant on looking at two areas. One is, as the superintendent and Caitlin both previously mentioned, a review of the potential for consolidation of school facilities. And then the second area is in the area of potential for shared services. So we've engaged with Public Works LLC, which is the consultant that did last year's review of the Board of Ed financial operations. They've come up with a schedule and a phased approach to the shared services piece, which is to look initially, because we'd like some results and some recommendations that we can build into the 27 budget, to initially look at financial operations, largely human resources operations, and then a few other select areas that are more specific, for example, medical billing, and where there may be opportunities to consolidate, share services, or just improve services and operations. That's phase one. That is targeted to be completed during the budget development period, so in advance of FY27, and then following that up with the remainder of the operations being reviewed through the rest of this 26 calendar year. Then the other, in parallel with that phase one, but extending a little bit beyond phase one, is the review of the school facilities. So that consultant has been engaged with those two sort of parallel studies, and we can answer any questions about that, but that's really the biggest area of movement. We've continued our work on the bonding package and the lease purchase. We're looking at getting a revised calendar from our bond advisor that we can share with you and then work on rolling that out and providing a more detailed plan to the treasurer and secretary when we have that together.
All right. Over to you, Caitlin, for any additional comments that you want to make on the board sides for the 5-year
I
plan.
think they're all captured in the presentation we're going to do in terms of
Okay.
updated deficit projection and mitigation. So I think just doing that all together would probably make the most sense.
Very good. Then do we want to change the order since we already have the momentum going on your presentation? Is this presentation actually for us probably the agenda item G?
Yes, exactly.
All
If
right.
you're open to it.
Yes, I'm open to switching the order to keep the momentum going as long as the board members are. I think we need a motion, right, to move the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second, Sallucciano.
Thank you, Sal. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I
I,
Go ahead, Caitlin. Thank you.
All right. I'm glad we have the momentum.
Let's
So
keep
this
it
is a
going.
Yeah, this is a continuation of the PowerPoint I was just presenting from. I'm now on slide 6 if you want to follow along. So this is really going to get at some of the discussion we've been having, the questions, continuation from the previous conversations we've had. This is the overall summary, and I'm going to go into a lot of data related to it, both financially, but also an update on our enrollment data. What the takeaway is, we have a structural deficit. It's about $35 million next year now that we've updated the projection. And it's really driven by specifically special education tuition and door-to-door transportation for Hartford resident students who are either engaging in the choice system, so attending a non-Hartford magnet school, an open choice school, or are an out of district placement. So they're in a private special education facility. That is the biggest driver. We did look at some of that data last time. I'll remind you of it this time. But really what this means we want to focus on is, and I think someone raised this, what is the legislative moves that would be helpful, especially at this intersection of special education and school choice funding? And then also, we really appreciated the presentation we got about in-house special education programming. And so thank you for that. And it's something that we are actively working on right now to say, how can we build more in-house programming in Hartford to be able to bring more students back home and serve them within the district, and also, as we know, generate cost savings. So a win-win on that front. So it's really a dual focus. What can we do to help create better programs for students within the district? And then what do we need to change structurally to fix this situation? So that's the overall summary. And this, I will also share this same presentation. We've been doing community engagement related to it. So we've talked with our staff. We had a community meeting, community partners, union, really just to engage the folks really early in. This is the challenge of what we're facing, to bring them into the problem, to understand it, as opposed to, coming in March and saying, here's the budget, we have to make cuts. So I just want to say what you're getting here is some of what we've also shared more broadly in the community. So overall, how we're approaching this, we have our data collection phase that's really been this fall so that we have the best assumptions possible going into the budget. And then, like I mentioned, it's really twofold. What is the structural change that we need to make that would have the biggest impact on our financial sustainability? Because that's really our goal, is to be in a much more sustainable place than we are now. And then what are the decisions that we need to make with the resources we do have that both align to our new strategic plan and ideally increase efficiencies where we can. Finally, as I mentioned, community engagement has been a huge part of this to make sure that we're doing the educating and the getting the questions and the input from a lot of different audiences. This is our overall timeline. So we kicked off in October, again, really on that data collection piece to understand where we were trending with some of the data I shared with you. And like I said, January is when we will have more data to have a better estimate, specifically around things like tuition and transportation. This will help us form a better and more precise deficit estimate for next year. And then we will be kicking off the budget process with our school sites and central office teams to start working through that piece. And then we will, of course, be talking with our board along the way. They would vote on the budget in April, and then the city council votes on the budget in May. Simultaneous to all of this will be the state legislative session kicking off in February and ending in May. And so we will be thinking throughout that process about what structural changes would be helpful, what are we advocating for as we move through that budgeting process with our school teams. And I will say we've made some updates per all the Public Works recommendations to the process and the tools that we have to do that, to make that more streamlined and supportive. So this is going to be just an update on the 5-year projection. You all saw our 5-year projection the last time, but I did update it with the latest data that we have on this year. So really the pieces around how does enrollment affect our revenue and how do our staffing rates impact the projection, because all of those are factors that influence it. So I'm just going to go quickly through these first 2 slides. We did share with you, we're updating them related to our revenue. Main thing to know is that it's pretty flat, if not decreasing over time. And then on the expense side, increasing over time, largely in the categories of tuition, which is what you see in the orange, and transportation, which is what you see in the gray. This same trend is what we talked about last time, but so we've been sharing with this with the community to say this is what we mean by structural. There isn't much more revenue, but there continues to be this increase in expense, especially in those fixed expense categories. And so when you put it together, this is where you'll see some of the updated numbers. I included this year as well. That's that $18 million deficit we're projecting. You can see that that translates to increases in the out years, again, related to the revenue difference and also the expense difference for our staffing fill rates. So that's where we're seeing that $35 million-ish deficit projected for next year. I think the overall story is still the same. I know when we talked about this last time, we're getting into the $90 million 5 years from now, which is obviously unsustainable. And that's why we're having the conversation about what do we need to do about this as a whole team. So across the city, the state, us, in order to address this. So more updated numbers, but overall the same story. And this slide we also shared last time. There isn't an update on this front. We're still projecting as of now, until we have more data in January, what we were projecting related to tuition and transportation. This slide, as a reminder, was about Hartford resident students who either attend choice schools, so open choice, non-Hartford magnet, or are outplaced. And I know we followed up with some breakdown of that data to better understand how that plays out, with the main takeaway being that the difference between what we're paying right now in tuition and transportation for these students is less than what we're receiving in terms of the ECS funding we get per student, which in some cases does vary depending on the choice students are making of where to attend school. And then also the excess cost grant that we get when special education expenses are 4.5 times the average. So we talked about this a bit last time too. And the reminder is that really this difference between tuition and transportation and the revenue we get for students in the choice system or who are outplaced is this biggest driver. So when we look at FY27, that's about $37 million of the $35 million deficit. So that's really the biggest driver is in this area. And it's why we've been focusing on better understanding what those dynamics are. In an effort to do that, so now I'm going to change this. That was a bit of a repeat of what you've seen with some slightly updated data. What I'm going to shift to now is our enrollment analysis. And as was mentioned, it is important to understand our enrollment because there are ways that it impacts our financials. Some of those are very complicated, but there is a relationship between them. And so we are really seeking to understand how the enrollment has been trending over time, what is happening this year that might be different than other years, and to find what those pain points are. So this is our overall enrollment trend over time back to 2014. And what you will see is that it's been declining over time. I will say that's something that almost all large urban districts across the nation have been facing is enrollment decline. However, what you will see is that this year, so FY26, the actual, that last bar, is a significant drop. And so last year we had about 16,500 students, and that was pretty steady over the past couple of years since COVID. We dropped to 15,200 students. And so that's close to a 1,400 student drop. And that is a bigger drop than any other year in the past decade, even COVID. And so this really made us look and say, okay, we need to figure out what is going on here to understand why we have so many fewer students this year than last year. So these are some of the hypotheses about why that is happening. I'm going to talk about a couple specifically, but I will just name. We definitely saw a drop in kindergarten enrollment. There's a new kindergarten eligibility law. We also, as I mentioned, we have fewer suburban students enrolling in our magnet schools. But I do want to touch on this highlighted piece that is about additional seats are being opened through the Chef settlement agreement. So in 2022, there was the settlement agreement to Chef that involved opening additional seats outside of Hartford to meet the demand of Hartford residents. I'm going to go into more of that data, but you will see there is a relationship between the number of seats that have been opened in that time frame and the enrollment decline that we've experienced. We'll also talk about where those kids are going. And then I do want to highlight one other piece that is a national trend, which is about newcomer students. So we do see a drop in some of our multilingual learner students. We think some of this is based on immigration-related concerns. And I did have a chance to talk to CFOs across the country of other larger urban systems, and almost everyone is facing this. So everyone's facing some enrollment decline. A lot of it is related to these immigration-related concerns, but our enrollment decline was larger than other places, which is why we were looking at what is unique to Hartford specifically, and why we're looking closer at the Chef settlement agreement. So when we look at overall enrollment, what we did was we just looked at the past 4 years, and we said who has left Hartford Public Schools during that time. There's obviously another half of this analysis that's students who have entered the system, but we really wanted to understand the patterns of exit first. So in the past 4 years, there's been about 7,400-ish students who have left Hartford Public Schools. Of those, about 5,100 relocated outside of Hartford, and about 2,300 of them still live here, but they chose to go to another school option. And we're going to talk about each of those separately because they're really kind of two different dynamics. And I will say this is where you see that point around the school choice and the Chef settlement agreement. And so there was about 1,600 seats that were added as of this year. So those are seats for Hartford resident students to attend schools outside of Hartford, either through a magnet school or the open choice system. And so we are seeing a relationship between those seats being added and a drop of students attending Hartford Public Schools. That number is expected to grow to about 2,700 by 2029. And so this is something that we are going to continue to face, but is likely related to some of that, the drop we have seen related to students who are choosing other school options but still live in Hartford. And I have a couple more slides, and then I will pause for questions before the other part of the presentation, just because I know this is a lot of data. So this is the piece that is on Hartford students who moved from the city of Hartford in the past 4 years. So it's about 5,100 students. And I think the key takeaway here is most of those families moved to the suburbs of Hartford. And so about 3,600 of them are still in the area. They're still in the region. They just moved to a suburb, namely New Britain, East Hartford, Manchester, West Hartford. So we see this urban to suburban migration during this time. A smaller set moved to a different state or a different country, but that is also part of the dynamic. But the main one really is folks moving to the suburbs of Hartford. That's kind of a bigger kind of city level trend. When it comes to our students that are still in Hartford, so they still live here, but they've chosen another school option. Again, that's about 2,300 students in the past 4 years. And the way to look at this set of data, it's actually helpful to look at the furthest right column first, just to say, okay, out of all Hartford resident students attending schools outside of Hartford Public Schools, where are they enrolled? And so the superintendent mentioned we have about 9,000, actually at this point, close to 10,000 students who live in Hartford, but they've chosen to go to another school option. And you can see of that about, and this is just based on October 1st of this fall, about 5,100 are in magnets, non-Hartford magnet schools, CREC being the biggest of those. The next biggest category is open choice. So that's when a student is choosing to go to a suburban district. That's about 2,200 of them. And then charter schools would be the third biggest category with about 1,600 students choosing to go to charter schools. So that's Hartford resident students choosing to go to another school option in total. And then the left column is how many of those students left in the past 4 years. So you can see in the past 4 years, of that 5,000 students attending magnet schools, about 1,000 of them, that happened in the past 4 years. So another way of looking at that data to just understand the trend in what students have chosen in the past 4 years and how that may relate to seats being opened. This is just showing Hartford resident students who are in Hartford public schools, but they left over the past 4 years. And you can see this is by year how many students chose to enroll in a particular option. And so magnet schools, again, non-Hartford magnet schools like Craig, Goodwin, that has been increasing every year. So that's the place where we've seen the biggest increase in students who live in Hartford but are choosing to go somewhere other than Hartford public schools. And so all of this, what we're trying to understand is what are the patterns of enrollment? Where specifically are students leaving? What is driving that? And then ultimately to get us to kind of what are some of either the structural changes that need to be made or, things that we can do to continue to make Hartford a solid school choice option for folks. So I want to pause there. Lots of data, but I will pause just to see if there's any questions before I move on to the other part of this.
No, thank you for this in-depth, deep dive into this data, because I think that is also very helpful to understand for all of us. I don't have any questions, members. Yes, Kevin.
Just a quick one on the particular data point of the 300 some odd multilingual learners that you have seen drop. Is the theory there that people are still living in Hartford and staying home out of fear? Is that the thought that that's where those kids have gone?
That is one possibility, especially just talking to people nationally about what they're seeing. Another piece is just fewer newcomer students enrolling. So people who just never came here in the first place related to certain fears or potentially have left the area. So yes, but that would be another one is just they are here but have stayed home. But I think there is the piece too around just patterns of movement of people coming here in the first place.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Kim. I just want to say I really appreciate the deep dive that you did looking at the breakdown of your student population, because it really, in terms of like who has left your district, because it really helps to inform and emphasize for me as the state continues to comply with the latest chef agreement, you're going to have more and more kids exit your district. It's going to further increase the amount of tuition that you're paying out, both general education and special education. And therefore your budget, I know that when you're looking at forecasting, you're presumably, and this should be a question, are you estimating the reduction in the number of students in your buildings that are exiting that you'll be responsible for tuition moving forward and your deficits the 5 years out?
Yes, that is part of it. Obviously, we can only do it so accurately, but yes, we are projecting the enrollment decline and what that means for tuition.
And estimating as best as you can. Of course, it's not entirely up to you, and it's just a bill that you all receive. So I just appreciate the fact that you took the time to break down those figures for us. So thank you.
Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, I also appreciate the deep dive. I think it really does help illuminate some of the unique challenges that that Hartford faces. Certainly, the chef case is, or chef decision, if you will, is something sort of unique to Hartford and the Hartford region, and it does have a pretty material impact on your entire district and your financials of your district. Now, knowing where I usually come from, I have to ask the question. decline in enrollment, and I understand the desire to change that, and I hope you're successful in doing that. And I do believe that would, ultimately, help your financial situation. But my question really is, in terms of your multi-year budget projections, have you tried to factor in any savings from having a reduced student population, based on, potentially needing fewer sections of, K through 5 or whatever? And has that been built into your multi-year forecast, or are you at this point really assuming that there isn't going to be any savings from declines in enrollment?
That is part of the analysis. And so even looking at for next year, predicting decreased enrollment based on what we've seen, that would mean in some cases fewer total sections or staffing allocations needed. What I'll say is part of the challenge is it's not always proportional, right? And so with the number of students leaving, with the tuition payments, and really depending on the needs they have, especially related to special education, versus, because if you think about it, if a couple students leave from a school, oftentimes you need the same number of teachers for the students who have stayed. And so a lot of it is really complex in terms of the patterns of where students are leaving from and what that then means, because to your point, our staffing formulas do run based on enrollment. And so if there are enough fewer students to generate one less staffing allocation, there is some level of efficiency there, but it just isn't necessarily proportional to some of what the decline generates in terms of tuition payments. And of course, hard to predict, as I mentioned, in terms of both the enrollment, where students are leaving from, what the payments will be. So my answer is yes, it is factored in some assumption related to not needing as many classes as before, but it can be complicated because it depends on where the students leave from. And it's not, oftentimes you still need the same-ish number of teachers in a school for the students who choose to remain.
Thank you for that. Yeah, when you take a look at your deficit on the tuition schedule that you provided, and then you look at your, I'll call it revenues over revenue less expenditures, and you layer the two, and you put that, it definitely highlights where your efforts need to be and also where the structural problem is. So I think that is helpful. If we, take the difference between the 2 pages, you've really highlighted the need for some changes there, or this is going to continue. So thank you. I think that I don't see any more hands up, so I think you can move on to the next part of your presentation. I think that will be excited to hear.
Hope I have you all at the edge of your seat.
Or learn.
So I'm going to turn to a bit kind of how we're thinking internally of how to align our budget to our strategic plan, some of the areas we're looking at. And I will say our legislative advocacy task force has just kicked off as well. There was a meeting yesterday, which really is saying, okay, and we're looking at all of this data to say, what are the biggest kind of levers that would support? Because I think what we want to be true is that we want to make Hartford Public Schools a place that students choose, and we want to be financially sustainable in all of these possible scenarios that we could face. So kind of a twofold approach, as I shared. This is just looking at, and this kind of gets at a point I made earlier, this is just our overall budget for this year. But the point I want to make here is that the fixed expenses, so tuition, transportation, and utilities at this point are about 38% of our budget, with tuition being about 30% of that. And so that is some of the challenge we face, is when 38% of the budget is fixed, there is only so much that can be done to the other parts of the budget, with half of it being directly at school sites, and then the other smaller blue and green bars being our central office. And as the superintendent shared, so many cuts have been made in recent years, in the past decade, in the areas where we have more control. And that is really, it's taken a toll on school sites. And I'll talk more about some community feedback related to that. But when we have very little control over the fixed, the only place to cut from is the other pieces. And we're getting to the point where that is very difficult to do because of the cuts that have already been made. So when we're thinking about our budget for next year, we're really working to say, where are there areas that we can serve students better and be more efficient with resources? I'll share some examples of that. I think in-house special education programming is the perfect example of that. But also, where can we make shifts to support with additional funding or different funding structures that would support with the structural component? So we're really evaluating different parts of our budget with how does it align to the strategic plan? What are opportunities for funding? What do staff and students have to say about this community? And we are trying to think more multi-year. And so I think because Hartford has had so many challenges with the budget, sometimes it can feel like year to year, oh, we need to make cuts. But really, we want to think multi-year related to what we all talked about with in-house special ed programming. That's really a multi-year effort. We need to think about the startup costs. We need to think about what that's going to look like over time. So trying to take a longer term approach with some of the moves that we want to make. I'm just going to share briefly a little bit with you all about our strategic plan. I can send the full document as well because this was launched at our December board meeting this month. But so you all know we worked a lot. This was last year on getting community feedback, saying, what are the most important priorities for Hartford Public Schools, and kind of moved through to Dr. Townsell joining us, of course, and he's dove right in with his 100 days. And being able to kick off that plan starting in December. And this really is going to guide the work for the next 3 years for Hartford and the experiences that we want to create for students. So I'm just going to share the high level categories with you all because really we're thinking about how can we best utilize our resources to support these categories and where might we need additional resources to really make these more robust. So the first one is whole and healthy students. It's really about students' academic, emotional, physical needs with attention to our multilingual learners, our special education students, so students with the highest needs, and thinking through things like high school career pathways. That's really kind of whole student supports. We then have expansive learning and opportunity, which is about our community partnerships. And so making sure that we're able to partner with community partners to do after school programming, more real world experiences for students, that type of thing, as well as just community engagement. We then have a priority around skilled and diverse teams. And so this is really about attracting talent. I do think our recent teacher contract has been very helpful, as I shared, in doing so, but really building out quality professional learning and leadership opportunities for our staff. And then the final one is the one I am most focused on because this is about operational and management excellence. So it's how we use our resources well to provide services. And the first one actually is legislative advocacy. So that's a priority in our strategic plan, is to be really clear about what our legislative priorities are, which is why we've really been diving into the data to understand what would be most impactful. And then making sure we're doing things like cycles of continuous improvement to improve the way in which we're implementing things, to understand if a particular thing that we're implementing or investing may not be working, that we may need to pivot. So really just trying to be a data-centered organization and build that into how we are building the budget and implementing our various programs. And so what that has meant is that it's led us to kind of a set of budget, I would say, like areas of focus for next year. So the things that we are looking at in our budget process. And so the first I will name, we have a set of city-funded items for this year. I'll share that on the next slide. But we were really grateful to the city in the process last year. They are supporting us with certain items that we were going to have to reduce, but didn't have to thanks to their support. That was one-time funding, and so I just want to name it's a conversation that we will need to have going into next year for those specific items. So I'll talk about that on the next slide. I am excited about this next one. So high school scheduling and staffing is an area in which we're looking, and we actually just got a new tool that helps build different schedule options that starts with what the student course needs are for graduation requirements, what they're requesting, and then helps be a lot more strategic in thinking through creative staffing models. And it does include special education teachers, so it can take the IEP needs of the student and then think through what does that look like in their schedule alongside the other types of classes that they're taking. So we are really excited. We're doing this with all of our high schools this year and actually starting the budget process with the schedule piece and seeing where we can be more creative, more strategic, and use the people that we have better. Other districts that have done this have actually been able to reduce some vacant positions because they realize they don't actually need them if they can be really strategic in their schedules. So that's a big area in which we're focusing. Another area is just, and the next two rows are related. It's resource sharing across schools. So we do have a lot of schools that are co-located, they're nearby to each other. So thinking about partnerships across them. And then we will be doing we're calling it a feasibility study. And the RFP is going to go out, I believe, this week, actually. That's really helping us go even deeper than I just went into our enrollment trends, our resource use, course offerings for students, etc., to help us understand how we can best use our resources. And that will relate to, are there opportunities to better align feeder patterns if school consolidation should be on the table? I know the superintendent shared, and I shared the last time, something like school consolidation cannot be the only strategy to solve this problem. It really is not a major cost saver, but it's something we can think about from the lens of student experience and saying what experiences can students have if they were in a larger environment. But we're really going to be grounding that in a feasibility study by an objective third party. Julian mentioned this as well, who can really just dig into all of that data so we can understand what the opportunities are. But do just want to name, we don't see it as a major budget lever. It is just something we should be looking at from the lens of creating better experiences for our students. And then I have on here, I've mentioned it a few times, our special education in-house programming. We're really, like I said, grateful for the presentation about how we can think about that. Really a multi-year approach to saying what are some of the specific programs that we could increase and kind of get financial support for, because we know that that will be helpful to students to be closer to home, and it will save money in the long term. At this point, our special education outplacement tuition is averaging around $130,000 a year. So we're taking that into account, and that's rising every year. And so we're taking that into account as we think, what of those students could we serve better at home? And what would it take to do that really well? And we are encouraged by things such as a much lower vacancy rate that we would actually be able to staff programs like that. So that's a big place in which we're focusing internally. And then, of course, we'll look at basically everything else. So our central office staff and contracts, like I said, those have been slimmed down over time as well, but it is always worth reviewing those and just reviewing everything as it does align to that new strategic plan. So a couple more slides here. I do want to share, I would share with you just what are the one-time city funded items this year. So these are the items, again, that we were going to have to reduce, but the city was able to support us for this year. And so it's just a conversation we will need to have in the budget process about continuing beyond this year. But that did include some of our community partnerships. We have some that are funded by grants, but these are the ones not funded by grants. Opportunity Academy, which is for higher needs students who needed like an alternative school option. Ready CT and CT Rise, which work at our high schools, and then specifically some of our dental services. So just want to name, this came up in the budget process last year. We were really grateful for the funding this year, and we will need to have a conversation about it for next year. And the last piece I will share with you is that, as I mentioned, we have been doing community meetings related to this, and our goal is really to try to do this on a more frequent and lower stakes basis so that folks can learn about some of the context and share their input and experience without, like I said, sometimes I think it can feel like we're just telling them about cuts that are going to happen. And so trying to do more of what we just did today of sharing some of the data. And we really met with a lot of different audiences, but we did ask families, what is one thing that we could do right now to make a positive difference for you? And so I was just going to share some of those results. And one of them relates to finance in particular, which I thought was interesting. So we asked families, we got about 300 responses. They named some things that are really related to the strategic plan. So just academic support for students, school climate. So, things like discipline, culture, staff relationships. So how they feel about the relationship with their teacher, And then access to resources. So this was things like mental health support, basic needs, after school programs, and special education. So a lot of the things we've been talking about, but I did think it was interesting because one of the top themes was actually finance, and families said the concerns around finances and the budget cuts are really affecting us, and they're affecting kind of what students have a chance to experience. So I just wanted to lift that up because I think that as we have this conversation, it really is something. The financial stability of Hartford Public Schools really impacts families at the end of the day. And so us thinking through what can be done to change this, both things we can do to increase programming, but also the structural changes that may be necessary in terms of how we're funded, is really ultimately in service of that. So yeah, that's it for this presentation. Like I said, we will know more in January. That is also when we will share some of those legislative priorities. And that committee, like I said, kicked off yesterday, I believe, with starting to say what are some of the key areas we need to look at that would be most impactful. So I will pause there.
Thank you. That was a lot and very interesting, and it definitely had to be a whole village for you to pull all of this together. So I hope you have a great team that is that you're working with. I'm really excited over the fact that the presentation that Tom Hamilton provided, that which was a financial change that they did in special education in Norwalk when he worked there, that you found to be very helpful. We had shared that with the city a number of years ago, and it did not get picked up. And so I was very excited about it and to hear the tools that he had created. And I just want that messaging to continue to go out to others, because I think that people need a tool like that. We understand that there is an investment that needs to be made up front, but when you build the model, you think about a family who might have somebody with some special needs, but is it necessary that they have to be outsourced to another facility when their sibling is at the same facility? I'm sure they would like to be with their siblings, and so those are some things that I think about as I have more than one child, and if that should have happened to my child. So again, Mr. Hamilton, thank you very much for taking your time and teaching them the model that worked well for you. And I'm very excited about the fact that you're looking to pick that up. So I'm sure you're going to need some investment in that particular program. Any questions from the MARB members? All right, I don't see any. The next item on the agenda, as we had moved through the agenda and made a change, was an update from the Connecticut Department Education report that the Hartford Schools action to address the district needs. I believe, Superintendent, you started to maybe touch upon this, or am I not accurate? It was a different report that you were referring to.
You are accurate. It's the same, the letter
Okay.
that's in your packet.
Okay. And so let's just make sure, because it's on the agenda, that we have you just touch upon it briefly so that it wasn't skimmed over. And so I'll give you a little bit of background unless you've already mentioned all of this. In June of 24, I think you did mention that the State Department of Ed directed the Commissioner of Education to take necessary actions to ensure the stability of the fiscal operation of the Hartford Public Schools. And that's when a consultant was hired to review the fiscal processes and the procedures. In February of 2025, the consultant published their findings and recommendations. The Connecticut Department of Education in July of 2025 formed that Hartford Public School Accountability and Support Team, and to provide monitoring and technical assistance to Hartford Public Schools relating to the consulting recommendations that was included. And included in the packet today is the actual report that was provided. And Superintendent or Caitlin, if you have anything else that you would like to add upon in your presentation, please do so. It seems like you have ongoing efforts in meetings to make sure that progress is being made in that area.
Yes, I can take that. I'll just read the letter, the paragraphs that they have, just to put it on record for those that are listening. We received this letter December 2025. It says actions to address fiscal and grants management. Since June 2025, Hartford Public School has made significant progress in strengthening its fiscal and grants management processes and procedures. Under the leadership of our CFO, 14 of the 33 fiscal management recommendations and 4 of the 13 grant management recommendations are complete. The district has clarified roles in the finance department and program owners, updated and revised the budget development timeline, and developed a comprehensive guide to special funds that outlines the various federal and state funding sources and how each of the set funds should be allocated. The district continues to work with the Hartford Board of Education to review and update relevant fiscal policies, provide training to staff and guide to special funds, and work with the City of Hartford to develop guidelines for vendors, establish a more comprehensive fixed assessment management system, and develop a capital improvement plan. Actions to improve special education. Hartford Public School is making progress towards improving its internal systems to monitor special education certified vacancies, staff vacancies, and service delivery to students. With the support of the AST, the district has developed robust tools to monitor individualized education program, IEP, compliance, hiring of certified staff, education staff, and compensatory special education services. Hartford Public School will report these data monthly to the AST. The AST will also conduct observation of special education program in the district with the State Education Resource Center. Observational data shows high quality instruction occurring within programs across the district, with an opportunity for improvement in the use of staffing models across the schools to meet student needs. The AST is recommending that the district increasingly leverage the use of paraeducator support with direct oversight by certified special education personnel to maximize service delivery. And with regards to magnet funding, the executive summary presented to the State Board of Education in November has been shared with the superintendent, mayor, and chair of the Board of Education. Consistent with these recommendations, upon the completion of the final report, the Connecticut State Department of Education staff will begin process of assessing the impact of the new budget framework, as well as developing proposed parameters for the allocation of state funding for the consideration by the Board of Education. So, ladies and gentlemen, this letter is a certified report from the Connecticut State Department of Education that was delivered directly to me as the superintendent. So that's why I'm optimistic. That's why I'm encouraged. And that's why we look toward our future with anticipation as opposed to apprehension, because we're moving in the right direction. We just need everyone to continue to lean in and look at the fiscal challenge that we have in front of us. There's no mismanagement. There's no waste. We're stripped down to the bare bone and we still have a deficit. So my prayer is that all the stars align, and as we go into fiscal year 27, we receive the necessary support to ensure that we're a strong, cohesive system and do not have to threaten to cut more jobs or programming for kids, because that will hurt the future of Hartford Public Schools. So whatever capital, whatever power dynamics that exists, whatever influence that you have, my prayer is that we can garner those to turn towards Hartford Public School to sustain us, to help us with our structural deficit, and we deliver high quality education for young people in Hartford Public Schools. So I'll park my bus on that.
Thank you very much. That I think is quite helpful. Any questions? All right, let's move on to the next agenda item, which is a status update from the city and the board on your labor contracts. I know that both the mayor and the superintendent touched on this a little bit. We did include in the packet the schedule that is listed for all of their labor contracts. It's always helpful for us to see what's included, what's still being negotiated, and the impact or potential impact on the 5-year plan. So over to you first, Julian.
Yes, so
And I know
are, as the mayor mentioned, we are still in arbitration with the fire union. And as he noted, there are talks still underway in hopes of resolving outside of arbitration. We are in negotiation with the Lawyers Association, which is a very small unit, roughly 6 members. And then coming up in July, the 2 contracts that are expiring are the police union, which is by our standards quite large, well over 400 members, and CHPIA, which is a professionals association. Some of the professional and technical people in like our planning and zoning department, planners, zoning enforcement officers, technicians in our assessor's office, and those jobs of that nature, and school crossing guards. Other than that, we are current. I think there's a typo in the attachment in the meeting packet, but we are current with our public works union, so that doesn't come up for a couple of years. And that's our labor contract outlook.
Thank you. Over to you, Caitlin.
Yes, so we are current on all but 2 that we are actively in negotiations for that expired back in June. So those are our health professionals, and then our it's 566. It's a combination of custodians, trades workers, and food services. So actively in negotiations with both of those. And then we will be having 4 contracts come up this July. And I will say one of our goals is to be doing those earlier. Ideally, we will negotiate prior to it expiring is a goal that we have. It may take some time to get back on cycle with that. But the ones that we will be entering into negotiations with will be our substitute teachers, our child development associates. So those are like pre-K folks, and then education support, so support staff. And then finally, building and ground supervisors. That's the smallest one. There's only 7 people in that particular union, but we are in 2 right now, and then we will be starting 4 more that have expiration dates of this July.
Thank you. I have no comments, and I don't see any hands up. All right, we'll move on to the next agenda item, which I think we are closing in. Could somebody give me an update from the city on your FY25 audit, please? I'm guessing Leanne is with us.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, everyone.
How are
Leanne
you?
Ross. Good, thank you. I'm happy to present today that we are on track with our FY25 audit. We have the draft in hand, needing to submit final review comments this afternoon, while the draft is concurrently going through the internal review process at our audit firm, and on target to issue by the 31st.
Fantastic news. We'll look forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Happy holidays to everyone.
Oh, happy holidays to you. Next item on the agenda is Hartford's issuance of the general obligation bonds and the lease equipment. We did hear a bit about that. The city has been in the process of issuing $25 million in general obligation debt for critical infrastructure needs. We heard that from the mayor as well as Julian. $25 million in a lease purchase agreement for public works equipment, fire apparatus, and IT infrastructure. The city has provided, if the city could provide us with a little bit of an update. I know that we're looking for a timeline. Do you have anything more that you can add to that, Julian?
I don't. We had a timeline that was presented to us that was rather ambitious, and so we asked bond advisor to revise that. They're working with us on preparing the bond resolution that'll go before our council I can tell you, you touched on the components of the lease purchase, which is focused on, deferred replacements of heavy equipment and public works and fire and some IT infrastructure. And then the GO bonds are really for, core infrastructure, roads, sidewalks, drainage, some combination of those types of items, bridges. And we're still fine tuning sort of what will go into that, into the bond package as opposed to items that were probably more appropriately funded out of other sources. For example, the grants and aid funding, created an opportunity for us to
Right.
to sort of, strategize a little bit there. So that's super helpful.
Okay, that sounds good. As we take a look for the next agenda item for today's discussion on other business is for us, the board members, to review and approve the MARB 2026 meeting. Julian, please keep that in mind as the bond issuance. I would like to update the board members with a timeline and such. But after we look at the calendar, should we need to do something differently, I would like to move forward. So the next agenda item is for us to review the calendar, and we are planning for 6 meetings overall for the entire year, 4 of which will be full MARB meetings, and 1 a subcommittee, which would then focus on the budget before the full board receives the budget. And all of the meetings, 3 of them to be in person at the Legislative Office Building, and 2 of them to be Teams meetings for the subcommittee, as well as the end of the year December meeting. Seems like we get a better quorum during the holidays if we do a Teams meeting. So anybody have any questions about the meetings that have been put forward? And if not, if I could look for a motion for approval, that would be helpful.
David Miller, so moved.
Thank you, David.
Second.
Thank you, Sal.
Sec-
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, then the calendar has been approved. That will get posted on the state website, and we will then send out all the meeting invites to hold your calendars. The next item that I would like to just note for the committee is usually when we start a new calendar year, we give the board members an opportunity if they would like to join a subcommittee. We only have 1 subcommittee and 1 scheduled for the year at this time. We currently have 5 members. We did have 7 members that were included. So since we no longer have West Haven, and we did have some members that were part of their subcommittee, if there is any interest to join the Hartford subcommittee, please do me a favor and reach out directly to myself and or John Mayer, and let us know of interest. And otherwise, if we don't receive any, then we will wait for the vacant seats to get filled. We are in the process, as we've put a couple recommendations over to the governor's office for consideration for 2 of our vacant board seats. Any other items for other business today? Well, before we end, happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, and a happy New Year to everyone. And we will not see you until March, unless something should spark up that we would need a special meeting for. So happy holidays, and thank you all for your service.
Motion to adjourn, Sal Luciano.
Thank you, Sal.
Second.
David Miller, second.
Thank you, David. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All
Happy
right.
holidays, everyone.
Happy
Happy
holidays.
holidays.
Yes.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.